Good morning, everyone. Bon Sabbat, Feliz Sabado, happy Sabbath, everyone. I hope your Sabbath is going amazingly well, and it's good afternoon. It's an afternoon devotional today. Church just finished, and yes, I had a late start to my day today. So, welcome. So, our story, we're still on shame, and we're looking at one of my favorite, absolute favorite character in the Bible, the woman at the well. Yes, I love that story so much. John chapter 4. And here we find this woman, the Samaritan woman. And for a long while, people preach about this woman, still preach about her as a serial fornicator, which the Bible never tells us that about this woman. We try to bring such a shame on this woman to make her story more believable because, she's a woman, number one, and number two, it sounds better to our ears. And we cannot understand fully the Bible without looking at their cultural baggages and bigotries that they have to gain full understanding of her story and what this woman had to go through. Now, these women were married as young as 12 or was exposed to husbands as young as age 12. And as they grow and get older, they get married to these men. And these men were older men often, and sometimes they had other wives. And in their culture, some had one wife and some had more than one wives because Lamech was the first person, Cain descendant, who said, well, if God put a mark on Cain, I am Cain descendant and I am going to take myself two wives. And that's where the dual wife started. That was not God's plan, according to the Bible. That was the first recorded instance of someone blatantly saying that because God put a mark on him and says no one can touch him, he said he was going to have two wives. So here we find my favorite lovely Samaritan lady here. Now, she was a Samaritan woman, and by being virtue of being a Samaritan woman, she was already a disdain to society in the Jews' eyes because Samaritans were treated like lower level citizens, like less than dogs, Like in the early days, they would say no Irish, no black. Yes, in the early days of the British culture. And, they treated and no dogs. There were the signs on the doors, no pets. When the people were trying to rent their homes, that's the signs they would put up to deter those people from renting from them. And that's the nasty, dirty history of a world that we live in. And so this woman, we try to put her into a cultural lenses, and that's why I use an example to give an understanding of what this woman would have been going through as a Samaritan woman. Because remember, they were seen as half-breed. And in the time of Uriah, he says, put away those wives that weren't apart. And when they were scattered, the Harahem people were left, the people of the land, so to speak, and the kings who had invaded these countries took the best talents out of Israel and leave only the poorer quality people in the land. So when he replaced people in the land, they intermixed with the people who were in the land. And the Samaritans were half-breed heretics, so to speak, they were called. And because of that, they were seen as less than human beings. And what they did, they built their own temple on Mount Gerizim. So, when you have the two mounts, Mount of Blessing and Mount of Curse. And so they were on Mount Gerizim. So they didn't have to go to Jerusalem to deal with the outcast treatment from the Jewish people who consider themselves fully bred and only in God's eyes and only the inheritors of God's blessing. So these Samaritans had their own temple on Mount Gerizim, and they did things a little bit different from their cousins and relatives, who were in Jerusalem worship. And so, Jesus was talking to her and he says, you talk what know about because yes, you were part together, one family, but the lineage was coming from Judah and Jesus was coming from Judah's lineage, but they were still looking for the Messiah. And so when she met Jesus, so there are many twists of the story when she met Jesus. She did a different perspective. But as I unpack this story, it's one of the story I've done a lot of stuff on. And that's my favorite narrative story. One of my favorite narrative stories, which I do narrative sermon because that's how God had given that story to me, and to do it as a narrative. I've done it as a hybrid also. So this woman was as an outcast by just being a Samaritan woman, and Jesus was coming towards a time where his time is running out on this earth, and so he was opening up the gospel. He's done everything he could do to reach the Jews, and now he was extending it to to the Samaritans, the cousins of the Jewish people, which were also a part before this kingdom was mixed or split in two, as you already know. So Jesus knew his time was short. So he was going over now to the other lost sheep of Israel, the Samaritans, and he was extending salvation to them. So this woman, in her culture, you were allowed to marry 3 times. And after that, it's a shame and disgrace. So the very fact that she was married 5 times was shame and disgrace. Now we look at the woman as if she's the problem. Now in the Jewish culture, a man can divorce a woman. If she couldn't cook, he divorced her. She couldn't bear children, she could have been divorced. Whatever it is, she burned the pot, he could divorce her for any and no reason at all. So this woman was divorced. The only woman in the Bible who divorced her husband was Herodias, Herod's wife. And John the Baptist spoke out against her because she took her husband's brother, and he took his brother's wife and got married to her. And, that's adultery. So, and, see, John the Baptist lost his head for that. So this woman, in understanding her plight she was in, this woman was in a culture that made her like a chattel. She moved. I mean, there could be a million of situations that concerning her. We talk about Tamar, and we see Tamar being passed to 2 brothers. This could have been this woman's story. She could have married an older man or a younger man. He could have died, and she was passed on to the family line. Or she was staying in her father's house and someone else come and get her. And she had to stay there and wear black in mourning until she was remarried or being supported in her father's household. For some reason, this woman her husband could have died. She could have married another. She could have been passed on to a couple of brothers, but she was divorced 5 times. The Bible said she had 5 husbands, whether it was by death or divorce, whatever the situation is, not me to judge. She was married 5 times, legally married 5 times. Now, in her culture, as I said, 3 was more than enough. The rabbinic rules allow 3 marriages, so that make this woman the talk of the town. And as we can see in the story of Tamar, the fact that Judah never took responsibility that his sons were evil, he blamed it on Tamar. Oh, who kind of woman is she that she just keep killing my sons keep dying? And she didn't want to give Shelan. There was a problem in Judah's household. And this woman had to bear the shame of being married 5 times like a chattel, to have capabilities and not being able to use these capabilities, to be passed around like chattels and possession, and to be passed from men to men. And each relationship she would have in, she would have left a piece of her behind. This woman was broken, living in shame and brokenness and trauma. And to live in such a culture is to lose all of your rights and your powers and your capabilities as a woman. Oftentimes, we look at the story through our mother lenses and miss what this woman's real plight is. Time does not give me permission to delve into it. But this woman got to the point where she needed to survive. Maybe she had no children, because if she had no children, her situation was even worse. This woman had no way of taking care of herself. So now she finds herself, no, her husband, her parents couldn't pawn her off and pay a dowry for her anymore, because now she was up in age, gone through 5 husbands, who's going to marry her? So she found herself having needs to be met. Whether there were sexual needs or financial needs, this woman needed somewhere to live and needed somewhere to take care of her. So she found herself in a situation where she shack up in her modern day term. She was living common law, so to speak, with this man. And in our world today, you see common law now have rights. And she had no common law rights then. So here she was living with this man that wasn't her husband. Whatever the arrangement was, whether it was friendship with benefits, we don't know. Whatever the arrangement was, she was living with this man. This woman was hungry spiritually and hungry physically and sexually. She was living with a man who wasn't really her own, because she wasn't her husband. Many people read into that she was living with somebody else's husband. The Bible never tells us that, and I'm not going to read into that. So we know she was a fornicator, but we make her an adulterer because we assume that the man she was living with was somebody else's own. So naturally, the women in the city and village will be talking about her, because one, she can't keep a man for different reasons, whether he died or whether the fact is that she was widowed. Whatever her circumstances was, she could not keep her husband alive. So she was the talk of the town. Maybe she had no kids, that make matters even worse. So we see her in this dilemma where she was the talk of the town. women normally go to gather water. I mean, if you've ever been to Israel, you'll recognize that place is so harsh. There's some places no greenery, just arid land. And to imagine, I mean, when I went there, you know, I am a melanin sister, and I was burnt up, burnt up. When I take my clothes off, you could see the lining of my clothes because my hat, my little hat, wasn't even enough to cover me from the Israeli heat. I was so scorched in the sweltering heat, walking up Megiddo, working up different places and all these different arid places and deserts and cemeteries and stuff. I mean, I was livid. I was so scorched and burned by the Israel sun. So, can you imagine this woman going in the middle of the sun, the middle of the day, to catch water in the middle of the sun, to catch water to meet her needs? That's the time of the day there will be no women there wagging their mouth and talking about her. That was the NBC and the CNN and the CBC and the Sun's newspaper and all the gossip papers, yes, that people buy to feed themselves with the lies. She was always the center and the talk of what was going on in her village. This woman was living a life of shame and disgrace. And whether she went there in the middle of the day because she couldn't be bothered and she just wanted a moment of fresh reprieve from the talk of the town, this woman found herself in a shameful situation. But that day, Jesus knew her shameful past and was about to set her free from her shame and her disgrace. Jesus had need to be there because even though she was shameful, she was still, you know, some of us in church, we're in church and we come looking dressed up pretty, but we're living shameful lives. When we leave church, we go shack up with men. We go to places, questionable places, and we go do stuff that God doesn't want us to do. And some of us, when we see ourselves in the week, we look different from the way we look on Sabbath because we're living double lives and double standards. And if only night could turn to day, our life of shame would be revealed like this woman. But Jesus said he made a deliberate detour that day because he had need to be in Samaria. Jesus could use anybody else. Now, in their culture, when a man meets a woman at the well, that's normally marriage situation. But that day, this woman had a spiritual marriage encounter with Jesus at the well. Jesus already knew who she was. As much as you want to make this woman an outcast or shame of society, which she was, this woman knew more spiritually than many people did. So when she came that day to the well to meet Jesus, she said, you know, you a Jew wants to meet for water? That was natural because Jews, they were so, if you think about the implication of Jesus asking her to provide him with an internal substance, that would have no go for any Jew that is in their right mind. Any righteous Jew would ask that, would even want to drink from her bucket because of how unclean this woman was in their culture. And so when Jesus asked her for a drink, she was like, hey, this is strange. And then when he started to tell her about her life story and about her business, this woman recognized that Jesus wasn't no ordinary person. Right away, could this be the Christ? I like the way she did her stuff. So when Jesus showed her some spiritual truth, she moved the story for different reasons. Yes, it could be for shame, but she also recognized that, like everybody else who met Jesus, that he had something she wanted. Jesus was feeding naturally the emptiness that was longing that was in this woman. Like everybody else who come in contact with Jesus, this woman's need was being met. Jesus was meeting the emptiness that was in her heart that no 5 husbands plus the 6 she was shacking up with could have met in her lives. This woman recognized that there was more to this man at the well than meet the eyes. The Bible tells us that there was nothing beautiful or comely or attractive about Jesus, but the way Jesus treated people and the words and beauty from inside was what attracted people to him. This woman was no exception. When you come in contact with Jesus, your shame becomes nothing but love, grace, and mercy. You see, the shame and disgrace you carry when you come in contact with Jesus, you see through different lenses. And this woman saw that. So this woman wanted more from Jesus that day. Whether she was changing the story because she was shame and disgrace, she also recognized that there was more to this man and she wanted it. When Jesus offered living water, without going too much into the story, because I want to keep it short and brief, and I'm already over, Jesus says, I'll give you living water. She said, give it to me. Give me right now. I don't want to go back to the emptiness that I have at home. I don't want to go back running from people. But the beauty of the story is This woman recognized in Jesus that she had everything she needed and wanted, to the point where she left the water pot for the well. She now have living water, and recognize what many Pharisees and people in church doesn't recognize. You see, Rahab was a prostitute. I don't think we reach Rahab, but somebody Rahab for another day. So you see, these prostitutes and other people who we put as outcasts of society, when they come in contact with Jesus, like Bartimaeus we talk about, he was couldn't see. He recognized that his sight wasn't all he needed because he had the real deal. This woman likewise recognized that Jesus was all she needed to fill the emptiness and the longing of her heart. So she left the water pot behind and she went to the very people she was running from. She came to the well in the light of the day. She went to the very people. And I like the way she evangelized. She didn't say, hey, I met Jesus. As Andrew told his brother, isn't this the Christ? She says, come see a man who told me all I've done. Now, these people have been wagging their mouth about this woman all her life. They've been talking her. I mean, the woman was tired of being talked about. She was a gossip of the town. And this woman didn't care about that anymore. This woman was now new in Christ and no longer have to worry about her shame and disgrace. This woman found joy. She found release. And the shame was no more because Jesus had forgiven her of her shame and disgrace. This woman now become an evangelist. Yes, she's a woman. I mean, if you think that God cannot use women, think again, because most of the most powerful points in Jesus' life was witnessed by women. And Jesus is no respecter of person. Jesus says in Jesus, there's no male and female. We're all 11 foot at the foot of the cross. So Jesus saw this woman, and when he met this woman, he gave her something new, a new identity, a new purpose, new hope. The shame was all gone. Some of us, too many of us, hold on to the shame of the past, and we've been coming to Jesus asking for forgiveness, and Jesus has forgiven us, but we're clinging to the guilt and the shame of the past. Now, anything that's out in the open and in the wild, you don't have to worry about it anymore, because people will talk and wag their mouth, but they must stop. Yes, their mouth must be refreshed and clean because it becomes stink and stenchy if the mouth is not open. But we need to recognize that people can only talk for so much and no more. They must stop. And that's why when people try to bribe you, anything that comes out in the open becomes public news, and public news don't last for long. They must stop talking. They must stop talking. So this woman was no longer living under shame and disgrace because Jesus had set her free, just like he wants to set you free this morning. Sometimes we allow the embarrassment of a failed relationship and because of what other people are going to say to hold us stagnant. We live in the past glories that we have when God says our mercies are new every morning. This woman at the well did not allow her shame to be stopped her from, because she recognized that God had taken that shame. She felt a new and boldness that she never had before, that this woman went to say, come see a man who told me all I have done. Is not the Christ we've been waiting for? No, Jesus had been living in Nazareth with these people, and this is how they describe Jesus. Can there anything good come out of Nazareth? Jesus lived in the slum of Nazareth. The slum of Nazareth. And he lived in a ghetto. So nothing good can come out of the ghetto, they say. So Jesus came out of the ghetto. So when Jesus confronted them, they were, isn't this Joseph's son? Joseph the carpenter? Who does he think he is talking to us? This is how they treated Jesus. You have no honor in your country, your own place. They treat you bad like nothing often. But this woman recognized, these very half-breed Samaritan, they accepted Jesus wholeheartedly. They came and they said, hey, we're not only believing Jesus because of what you told us, but because we heard for ourselves. And they asked Jesus to tarry with him and in their countries, and hundreds and thousands came to Jesus more than came in those people who felt they were full in the house of God. Message of word to us as Christians. We believe that because we are in the church for 40 odd years and 20 odd years, and we were born into the church, or we're in the church for umpteen years, that we have special privilege to God. If you don't have a relationship with God, you hide your shame and don't accept Jesus and allow Jesus to rid you of that shame and disgrace, you have no lot or part with Jesus. So you can hide yourself behind your clothes and behind your doctrine and your spiritual debates, unless, like this woman, you accept God's forgiveness for your shame and disgrace and accept that relational intimacy with Jesus and go share him and tell others about him, you will have no lot or part with Jesus. Like this woman, we don't have to live in our shame and disgrace. When we come in contact with Jesus, we are a new being. We don't have to worry about the many mess we make of our lives or the bad mistake and the things we did last week and last night. When we come to Jesus with clean hearts and ask for forgiveness, Jesus will take us and give us boldness and new courage and hope that we are new beings in him, that we can shine and win souls and heart for him. For those of you with a dirty past that you don't want others, you can reach people that nobody else can reach because of that same dirty mess to pass. Remember, Rahab the harlot, the prostitute, was the grandmother, great-grandmother of Jesus' line. Remember that Boaz's mother was Rahab the harlot. Who was Jesse's? And Obed was Jesse's father. So great-grandmother and great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-great-great-great in Jesus' line. So just remember that God doesn't care about our past. He cares about your present and your future. It's time to let go the shame of the past. Stop holding yourself in the guilt and shame when Christ has set you free. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the story of the woman at the well. God, you show that you are no respecter of person. And even when others see us as outcasts, in your eyes, we can be beauty. You take her from the past of shame and a woman living in disgrace to a woman with purpose. Lord, we thank you, God, that you're a God of mercy and grace and that you can transform our past. We ask you to transform us this morning, Holy Spirit, and make us into new being and a witness and a testimony for you in Jesus' name. Amen. It's time to let go of that shame. Remember to click the red button and subscribe. Click all and also click the link and subscribe to Intentional Healing, where you can learn about people who have received their healing only because they have allowed Jesus into their lives. And he, like this woman, take a deliberate, intentional detour, and he too can make that difference in your life. Have a blessed Sabbath. Bye-bye. God bless.